Today's topic is United States enters World War I and what was going on in the U.S. domestically. So looking at the site, we are at this section right here. We have Wilson's war message to Congress. Here we have some political cartoons about looking at the role of women during the conflict. What else we have? Jeanette Rankin. It says up here, she cast her vote against U.S. entry into World War I. Here you can read her arguments for her vote. And of course, we have the political cartoon that looks at German submarine warfare, all of which are reasons for the United States to enter the conflict, which is primarily the focus for this screencast. Looking at this PowerPoint here, United States declares war. We already know the reasons, the Zimmerman note, Wilson's war message to Congress, and then we get to the point of how a nation fights a war with the guns versus butter graph. I will use this graph for every test because I definitely want you to know that when a nation is at war, jobs, the economy gets converted, and you start to see the production of war-related goods. So there's a pretty good chance that this factory that is possibly making an automobile will be converted to provide war-related goods. Looking at this chart here, during war, you're producing more guns than you are butter. So if we are here, we are producing at this particular point here, and then over here, this is lower than what is allocated here. It looks like 180, and that is looking at the amount of guns in comparison to butter. Butter basically means social goods. Nation is getting ready to fight for a war. Who is going to fight? World War I, the soldier fighting gets the nickname Doughboy. So if you look up Doughboy, you probably will come away with something referring to World War I. And we already know the technology that is killing a lot of people. So here we see some statistics with regard to the casualties for this conflict that is caused by the technology, the machine gun, chemical warfare, and so on. Let's see, where else are we? Okay, Russia's revolution. One of the causes for United States to enter the conflict, because Russia, one of the powers leaving the conflict, creates a 3-2 fight. It goes from Britain, France, Russia to now Britain and France fighting against Germany, Austria, and the Ottoman Empire. So why does this revolution take place? Well, here we see an image of Lenin trying to rally the Russian people against the Tsar. That's kind of what's going on in here. This is an image that's trying to explain a communist revolution using the Russia Revolution as the model. So Karl Marx, the guy who comes up with the ideas in his Communist Manifesto in 1846, here we have two groups, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The proletariat consisting of the working people, and the working people have to be activated by somebody who convinces them that it is in their best interest. So here is Lenin trying to convince the people of Russia that it is in their best interest to overthrow the Tsar, or the bourgeoisie, which is Marx's name for the ruling class. So in this particular situation, Lenin is going to remove Russia from the war because his revolution is going to be successful. How can a nation fight a war if they are also fighting a revolution at home? Next class, we will focus on the Ottoman Empire, and I guess that's it. If you want more information, feel free to take a look at this video that is on YouTube. It's Peter Jennings' Century video on World War I. All right, so for today, we are primarily concerned with what was going on in the United States during the war. So here we have this reading, addresses domestic issues, and of course, they cannot preview the file. Let's see if that works. Maybe not. Okay, maybe in here it'll come up. So I pretty much have one reading that addresses numerous items. So if that reading does open up, we have a reading on these particular topics. So the hope here would be that we have a student designated to read each of these particular readings. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you kind of work to figure out the information. So here we go. I have some excerpts from the reading right here because let's see, it's still not opening up. That's okay because I'm way ahead of the game. I uploaded this. So looking at this first reading that addresses Black and Mexican American workers, women, and the war effort. Then you kind of just scroll down. The next reading is about guns and butter. So this is looking at business interests. It's not too complicated here. Let's see if we're looking at this particular piece. Actually, let's just Yeah, here, I think I got this one. Let's just do this. All right. So, all right, looking here. Russia ordered 960,000 pounds of TNT. Here we have J.B. Morgan, 10 million to France, 500 million to the British. So these are all things in this reading that are addressing the United States, trade. And this comes from Elliot Asimov's book, 1919, America's Loss of Innocence. I guess his thesis is that 1919 is a turning point for American history because there are a lot of things that happened in 1919 where America sacrifices its ideals. I know that he talks about the White Sox scandal or the Black Sox scandal, where the World Series was intentionally, the players intentionally lost so that they could profit off of the gambling. And then another issue that he brings is the U.S. trade in World War I. So here he's just basically asking the question whether or not it's, should the nation that is exceptional worry about profiting off of war? You notice how he says we are rich with blood money. And he's referencing White over here, there, William White. And so he's looking at that particular dilemma. This particular section here, Black and Mexican American workers, we already talked about, the Great Migration that is going to force African Americans out of the South into war-related jobs to big cities. Here we're looking at women, factory jobs. 1 million women are joining the labor force. This particular reading looks at the Red Scare. So keep in mind, I mentioned previously that the Russian Revolution also has its impact in the United States. In the United States, this leads to what's known as the Red Scare, the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, which is a reference to Lenin's revolution in Russia. That creates a situation where Americans are starting to buy into the ideas of the working class overthrowing the ruling class. And so in the United States, you start to see Mitchell Palmer crack down on people that are trying to advocate for communist ideas. The Sacco Vanzetti case is another one where these two individuals were anarchists, and the people felt that they were held accountable or found guilty and executed, as a result of their political views. So when you're looking at this particular reading, it looks at, how people working in labor or the working class are potentially being targeted by leaders of maybe the Bolsheviks or communist ideas to try to incite a revolution comparable to the one in Russia in the United States, which is why the United States government is going to pass the Sedition Act as well as the Espionage Act. Keep in mind that these are going to be war measures. So it says here, if you're making or conveying false statements with intent to interfere with the operation or success of the military, so you cannot do anything that stands in the way of the United States military's ability to do their job. If you incite insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, any of these things could count for violation of the Sedition Act. Whereas in the Espionage Act, this one is really about if you're going to do anything that can be used to injure the United States. So that's the difference. Are you helping the enemy? Are you trying to incite potentially people in the United States? So when we look at this particular reading here, it's kind of looking at that particular point as well. It's just giving you more information about some of the specific events that happened. Is this really about unions upset about labor, or are they trying to incite some sort of revolution? This reading talks about the Armenian Genocide. It comes from the Bryce Toynbee report. And here it talks about some of the methods of intentionally targeting the Armenian population. People are going to be stripped naked, and they are going to be asked to march in unbearable conditions till they get to their destination. If we're looking at this particular section here, it's talking about the amount of people that are dying on one of these marches. This reading is, again, part of the Bryce Toynbee report. And this is a British report that talks about the amount of people that are dying in the Armenian genocide. Here you see an image of Armenians being marched by the special organization from point A to point B possibly being their final destination. However, since they're not providing resources for these individuals and they've killed all of the men and, tried to assimilate the children already, you start to see a situation that becomes apparent that these individuals intentionally tried to target these individuals. Here you see some New York Times reportings, some articles dated September 24, 1915. If you didn't notice, this is September 24. This is October 7th. Here they're reporting 500. Here they're reporting 800,000. That tells me in about a span of a week and a half, 300,000 Armenians have been counted destroyed or have perished. I don't know if you picked up on that. That's a way to kind of use data. Let's see. Some more images about the Armenian Genocide. Issues in the U.S. All right, so if we were in class, I would have asked you to fill out this chart looking at some of these items. So I'm probably going to go pretty fast at this point. Who's going to pay for this war? Well, the United States is going to issue Liberty bonds. These are loans that you can, or government loans. So maybe I'll use this example. If you buy a Liberty bond, maybe you spend $5 on this today, and in 7 years it matures, and now the government owes you $10. You kind of double your money. So a Liberty bond is a loan that the government has taken. As long as you have the bond that could verify that you are the person who taken out that loan during the war, and years later down the road, it will be worth more than what you paid. It's just a question to bring up. For the Sedition Act, if you were trying to, prevent somebody from buying a Liberty bond, you would be in violation of the Sedition Act. So let's just say you were going to a bank and you were trying to purchase a Liberty bond, and I was against the war, and I said, hey, don't go in there and buy a Liberty bond. You don't have any business. And I punched you in the face, and you decide, you know what, I'm not going to go ahead and buy the Liberty bond because that guy punched me in the nose. I could possibly be in violation. Why? Because I have just interfered with the operation or the success of the military. Why? Because the military needs this war bond so that they could buy weapons so they can kill Germans and Austrians and, I guess, Turks. All right, so think about that. Role play purchasing Liberty bonds, that's precisely what we would have done. How will the wounded be treated? We already addressed that you start to see in World War I plastic surgery. I don't know if you are aware of this, but now we're getting into some women history here. Blood tax. Blood tax is a term that's used to say how the two sexes pay for their debt to society. Men through war, women through providing children. Come to find out that during World War I, keep in mind World War I is a technological conflict, and you start to see women on the battlefields at some point playing the role of nurses. And eventually, this leads to the creation of a product called Gotex, which is an item that is used to assist women on their menstrual cycles. Why do I include this particular one? I don't know. It says something. Women playing the role of nurses are using cellulose, which was used to treat wounds, and eventually women start to use this product. And eventually this gets marketed to a new item called Kotex, because when we get to the 1920s, we are going to be looking at how advertisements are used. So anyway, that's just something to think about there, that World War I does have some connection to women's history in the United States. Let's see, what else do I have here? Guns and butter, I've already addressed this one. Looking at some of the amount of money and profit off of this conflict. What about this one? Industrial nation. One of the readings said workers went from making $6 to $100 a day. Think about that amount of money. That's $94 extra. That right there is going to create a boom in the business cycle, something that will be a direct cause for the Depression. Remember, I said that. That is definitely going to be an issue when we get to the Depression in the Roaring 20s. All right, who will work if the men are fighting? Well, we're going to look at the African-American population, the Harlem Hellfighters. This is a reference to some of the African-Americans that contributed during World War I. Women are going to be making the war goods. And when we start to see the African-American population leaving the South, going into some of the main cities, which is a 20s issue, as well as a World War I issue, but more of a 20s issue, where we see the Great Migration and African-Americans impacting where they go. This is an image of the Harlem Renaissance. Why? Because a significant amount of African Americans go to New York City and settle in Harlem, which is what this image here is trying to depict. The 20s, and notice how I'm talking about the 20s as well during World War I, because this starts to really show the difference between urban and rural America. I always have a difficult time saying rural America. Rural, it always messes with me. Anyway, think about it. If all of those military jobs are in the cities and people are moving into the cities and cities are starting to swell, there's definitely going to be a difference between the country part of America and the city of America. I've already addressed the Russian Revolution. This is going to lead to the Red Scare in the United States, or the fear that communism is somehow going to take over America. That's the fear. When you see the term Red Scare, that is what that is a reference to. The Palmer raids is a reference to Attorney General Mitchell Palmer targeting communists, and that's exactly what he's doing here. Uncle Sam is trying to target people who are being disloyal or traitors or spies or communists. Notice here says IWW, which is a reference to the Industrial Workers of the World. That was a labor organization that wanted to unite the workers of the world, and some people labeled this a communist organization. How is there evidence of a Red Scare in the United States? I've already mentioned the Sacco Vanzetti case. Feel free to take a look at that. These individuals were, accused of participating in a robbery. They may or may not have a gun. That was the gun that was used to kill someone, one of the guards. And before you know it, really the main point here is that people felt that they were found guilty and executed because of their connection to anarchy and left views, as opposed to, whether or not there was actual evidence against them. Sacco Vanzetti to die. So I guess that's pretty much it. I mean, you can go through some of these scenarios in class, like this one here. You're a business owner during the war. Cost you $60,000 to build a tank. How much would you charge and why? Think about that. If it costs you $60,000 to build a tank, how much are you going to sell that to the government for? 60,000, 70,000, 80,000? Well, if you sell it for 100, you're making 40,000. I would imagine the question now becomes, well, are you really being patriotic? I mean, think about that, because that's exactly what people like Maria Cui, Eugene Debs are going to claim. World War I is a war that's going to benefit the ruling class of America. It's a sample note. Like, this would be a way I would structure some test questions for quick identification. Who is going to produce? African American and women. Espionage Act. Are you helping the enemy? And number A, Sedition Act. Are you targeting people for speaking out against the war? Let's take a look at some of those scenarios. So feel free to pause. I'll just skim through these scenarios. So scenario 1, how do you fund the war? We've already addressed Liberty Bonds. Number 2, I've already addressed. What if it was a lot of money? You're going to change your idea. Scenario 3, pause it. What do you do? Let's move to scenario 4. Pause it. What do you do? Scenario 5. Pause it. And what do you do? Do you want to provide children a fight, make war goods, be a nurse, or fight? Which I would say, how do you ever pay your blood tax? Scenario 6. How do you deal with people advocating for revolution? That's something to think about there. How would you deal with German spies living in the United States? And that's pretty much it.